Welcome back to my series of reviews leading up to Captain America Brave New World. We've covered the 2003 Hulk film. Now we're on to The Incredible Hulk from 2008. Directed by Louis Terrier. I tried. I really did. Starring Edward Norton in the titular role, Liv Tyler, William Hurt, along with Tim Roth and Tim Blake Nelson. The plot's a very simple one. Bruce is on the run from the military and is desperate to try to find a cure. This was, along with the first Iron Man film from the same year in 2008, was a step towards building the Avengers. With General Ross, or soon-to-be President Ross, in Captain America 4 coming up soon, about to be the Red Hulk, for anyone who's new to my channel, I thought we'd take a look back on some of the live-action Hulk films, or anything related to Captain America or the Hulk lore of the Marvel Universe. I was curious to see my overall thoughts on this film looking back. I can still remember in 2008 when I saw the trailers for this, wondering if this was a sequel to the 2003 Hulk film with Eric Bana. After all this time, a lot of people considered this to be underrated, and even some will go as far as to say it's in their top 10 or 15 favorite comic book films. And of course, some have said in the usual similar arguments that we've heard in the last few years, it's better than most of the stuff that comes out with Marvel today. I mean, out of all the movies involving the Hulk, there's only two of his that are solo feature films. This one, if anything, I think is probably the best one out of those two. It's not saying much, but in comparison to what came before, I like it a little bit better than the 2003 Hulk. I didn't get to see this film in theaters. I think I might have seen it on demand on HBO or the Netflix disc that you would get in the mail long before it became a big streaming service like it is now. I've never really been a big fan of this one. Yes, seeing how the MCU has evolved since then, it definitely sticks out in a lot of ways aesthetically. It feels more like a movie, like a very serious drama, and when you contrast it to what we get now with the very comedic heavy entries in the MCU, in a way it is refreshing, but at the same time it kind of feels like something is missing. Now, I don't want jokes all the time every 5 seconds, and that's what a lot of people accuse the MCU of doing as of late. But even with the comedy, it does make some attempts. Some of it's okay, but some of it is not so great. In fact, it kind of feels very flat and lackluster in that category. But really, the characters are just kind of plain and basic. I mean, with Bruce Banner, he's really just a man on the run trying to find a cure. Then he runs into Betty Ross as he makes his way back to Virginia. But we do get some really nice moments, though, like when she sees him as she's talking to her current boyfriend. Bruce comes through the door not knowing that she's there. She does a double take when she sees him, realizing, wait a minute, Bruce? In fact, really the bond between Bruce and Betty, that's probably the only thing that I could say really gives the movie some kind of an emotional weight to it, but it doesn't really feel like there's enough there, and I think that they could have allowed it to have more of a focus. It's really my biggest criticism with the film. It's not really as deep as I think that they could have wanted to go in this area. As I've said before in my previous review, the Hulk is a very tormented soul, so the material warrants some kind of exploration in that inner turmoil and how Bruce doesn't really want to be a monster, yet at the same time he kind of does like that idea of power, that he can use it to his own advantage and help other people possibly. I mean, in the Avengers, he obviously manages to use it as a force of good, and by the end of this film, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, I just realized. He finds a way to harness his energy and find a perfect middle ground, always being angry, as he says in the next Avengers film, but also not being afraid of what's inside of him, which is paid off by the fact that he's training in jiu-jitsu and practicing meditation in order to harness that energy that he has boiling deep down. Some things about this film have come out over the years that Edward Norton wanted the film to be a certain way. There was apparently an extended cut, and one of you guys sent it to me through my Facebook Messenger, my YouTube Facebook profile messenger. Similar, I guess, to the Daredevil extended cut, which I have not seen, but that's another story. Watching this movie last night, I did kind of get the sense that there might have been some other stuff that had been going on that they trimmed down for time purposes, because this film feels a lot shorter than I remembered. I remembered it being somewhat longer. Maybe it's because I wasn't really paying attention to it, and granted, I wasn't really into it at the time. Watching it again last night, I was kind of surprised by how condensed it was. Makes me wonder how this cut feels in comparison to the extended cut. The 3 action sequences that are here feel a lot more to the point and not so dragged out, which I do kind of like, because after a while, in certain cases with action movies like this or anything in this realm of entertainment, there are some instances where it does go on a little bit longer than what some audiences would like to see. Case in point, the Transformers films by Michael Bay. But the first Hulk out that we get is when he's in the factory that Bruce is working in, and he gets antagonized by those bullies that were giving him a hard time. And like with the Ang Lee Hulk, we don't see him fully in Hulk form, and only in certain moments he does come out into the light. But it's meant to show you the kind of fear and uncertainty of what to expect from Bruce Banner when he gets angry. I think in the previous film it was done a little bit better, and given Bruce's emotional trauma in that film, it does kind of fit into that for me personally. But back to this film, on the college campus with the second Hulk out, as the military pins him into a corner, he turns into the Hulk in broad daylight and fights off the Humvees and the tanks, and then gets pinned down by these sonic machines, barely manages to get out with pieces of scrap from the Humvee trucks smashing the sonic tanks. Then he gets into a fight with Tim Roth's character, Emil Blonsky, kind of giving him a run for his money since Emil Blonsky took the super soldier serum, which is a big tie-in to Captain America.
Is that all you got?
Yeesh, that's bad. While we're here, the design of the Hulk, I'm not too crazy about. I mean, I like how he's not that much bigger, 3 times the size of Bruce Banner like he was in the Ang Lee Hulk. Height-wise, it fits more in line with Mark Ruffalo's Hulk size. Eric Bana Hulk didn't look exactly like Eric Bana. It kind of did, maybe a little bit. This one doesn't look anything like Edward Norton. Now, I'm not using that as a big criticism or anything, but to me it feels like there's some kind of disconnect. I don't really feel like it's the same character. I mean, they're obviously 2 different personas. For myself, it doesn't really feel like I'm watching Bruce Banner in Hulk form. Whereas Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, it looks a lot like him. And even with Harrison Ford's Red Hulk in the Brave New World trailers, looks an awful lot like him. I do like how the Hulk uses pieces of the trucks or any cars that are in his way as boxing gloves in order to combat his opponents, like he does use with the Abomination in the boss fight in Harlem. Bruce's intelligence is still up there, and he's able to figure out certain ways to combat his opponents without relying on the same old punches and kicks and jumps and all that stuff. And of course, with the final Hulk out scene in the middle of Harlem, when Emil Blonsky turns into the Abomination, Bruce comes in and they, as he says in the Avengers, he kind of broke Harlem.
Hulk! Smash!
That'll probably be enough for you if you're a big Hulk fan. As far as the lead up to that fight, when the Abomination comes out into the street, we get this really cool POV shot from behind these American soldiers and these cops, following the destruction that's unfolding right in front of them. And then when they finally see the back of the Abomination, they're horrified. And I really love how, in spite of all that danger that's right in front of their eyes, this soldier is willing to go face that danger head on.
Okay, hey, you drive! Let's go! Move!
In fact, that one sequence alone reminds me of Cloverfield. Now, we talked a lot about the action and the design. Really, as far as the characters go, as I've said, there's not really that much depth to them. I mean, there's some character moments that we do get, which add to some sort of emotional heft, with Bruce and Betty in particular. But everybody else, I feel like it's just very one note on the page. Nothing bad, but nothing exactly anything great to rave about. And General Ross, played by the late William Hurt, he's fine. Even then, there's really not much there to talk about with him. Emil Blonsky, who is this guy who's desperate for some kind of power and he's a natural fighter, when he takes on the Hulk, he's enticed by that idea and he wants to be exposed to gamma radiation to turn into a Hulk like Bruce Banner does. That, along with the super soldier serum, brings out what's really deep down inside of him. In a way, they are kind of very similar to each other. They mirror each other as far as what they want and what they don't want. But of course, the dichotomy can't be more obvious than it is. Maybe I did mention Edward Norton earlier. My brain's kind of mush right now. I'm kind of tired, so just bear with me. I've never really been a huge fan of Edward Norton's portrayal. It's not a bad portrayal. I think he plays the part perfectly fine. But there's nothing really on my end that stands out about him. Some of you will probably say that's because you're so used to Mark Ruffalo. Yes, but even before Mark Ruffalo, I wasn't really that thrilled about Edward Norton's portrayal either. And since I mentioned that there was some sort of extended cut on The Incredible Hulk, Edward Norton apparently had some disputes with Kevin Feige and the rest of the executives at Marvel, and they couldn't really come to some kind of an understanding, which was partially, I guess, the reason why he didn't show up in the Avengers. I don't really know, I haven't really read the whole story, but it doesn't really surprise me either, because Edward Norton does have a reputation for not being the easiest person to work with. Everybody else, from Liv Tyler to William Hurt, Tim Roth, and Tim Blake Nelson, all of them play their parts just fine, but the script doesn't really give them anything to work with that makes them stick out in anybody's minds, at least in my mind anyway. Even in some of the MCU films that aren't exactly the greatest, or maybe even by MCU standards they're bad, you could at least look to them and find something in there where you can say, oh, okay, that's actually not that bad. Oh, that's a great scene. I mean, I know what I said earlier, but I think that if anything, with a standout performance, Tim Blake Nelson is really the main attraction. If you're looking for somebody with some kind of energy in there. This character, Samuel Stern, is interacting with Bruce Banner to help him find a cure for the gamma radiation inside his blood. And then when he sees Bruce turning into the Hulk on the operating table, he becomes obsessed with that power and wanting it for himself, or wanting to create an army of some kind in order to cure people. But in the ensuing chaos, when Emil Blonsky turns into the Abomination and the army shows up, he gets wounded and a piece of that radiation falls onto his head, which is a big tease for him turning into the leader, who I guess guess is the main antagonist for the Hulk in the comics, if not one of them. And a lot of you know this, but for a long time, this character was practically forgotten about over the course of the 3 phases of the Infinity Saga. And I myself was kind of wondering here and there, are we ever going to see that be paid off later on down the line? Finally, that character's going to show up again in Brave New World. If you've seen any of the recent trailers, they found a way to fit Samuel Stern into the final cut. And I guess it has something to do with him infecting General Ross or President Ross. I was looking to see if they did something like that in this movie, but I don't remember seeing any of it. Maybe they'll explain it in the film that it was in between a set of films or whatnot. I don't know. We'll find out in Brave New World, I guess. Also, the big thing I noticed about this movie is that it does feel in a lot of ways like an episode of a TV show. Other fans have pointed out certain nods that it makes to the television show with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, who makes an appearance in this movie once again as a security guard. Now, I've never watched that show, so I can't say for sure, but I do like how they respect what came before while trying to do their own thing. Oh, and I just remembered, one of the best things that this movie does is summing up the origin story of the Hulk in the first few minutes, similar to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Now, with this film not being connected to the 2003 Hulk, it does make a smart move of not weighing itself down by explaining how Bruce Banner became the Hulk. Because if anything, I think we all know the basic premise by now. And of course, we have Lou Ferrigno along with Stan Lee, who drinks some kind of soda that came from Brazil that has some of Bruce's blood in there, and it made him not feel so great later on in the day. As soon as I saw him open the refrigerator door, I went, oh no, don't drink it, don't drink it!
Excelsior.
But along with other cameo appearances, the biggest one is Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, when he sees General Ross in the bar somewhere in Manhattan, telling him that they're going to put a team together. Pretty big confirmation at the time for Marvel fans that they were building towards the Avengers. It does give me like a bittersweet type of feeling where I go, oh man, how far we have come. So if anything, The Incredible Hulk, I would say, is a perfectly harmless take-it-or-leave-it entry. In fact, more or less a crowd-pleaser. In comparison to most of the MCU, it does feel very different and sticks out in a lot of ways, from an aesthetic standpoint anyway. But the narrative and the characterizations, I think, are pretty lacking and very hollow. But with the 2 feature films that are solo Hulk films, this is probably the best that we'll ever get. In fact, Universal, they have not even bothered to make a solo film since then. They've just allowed Marvel to have him show up as a guest appearance or a supporting role. Clearly that's been beneficial for the MCU, so why stop there? And even with all the stuff that we complained about with Sony Pictures, they're at least willing to try to collaborate with Marvel on giving us something with Spider-Man in a solo project. So yeah, not exactly for me, but I do understand the appeal. So that's all I got for The Incredible Hulk. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Stay tuned for my revisiting Captain America Civil War pretty soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one.